Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. I'm going to try something today that has been suggested to me a few times to do, and I've never tried it really, except for the experiment I did before I started filming today. And that worked, so I think I'll be able to do this, hopefully. And that is to set a little faceted stone in a bezel that after I drill a hole through a cabochon and mount it like that. I'm going to make a little pendant out of it, and I picked out a piece of lapis that I think will look nice with a little faceted CZ in the middle. The CZ is about 3 millimeters. The lapis is 18 by 24, and it's kind of a rounded rectangle shape. So I think it should make kind of a classic looking piece. You see a lot of that kind of stuff back from Victorian and Art Deco time periods, where they had a little gemstone set inside of either a carnelian or lapis or black onyx or something like that. So I think it should be a fun one. Before we get into that, though, I needed to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. I could not do this without their support. They're a nice group of people with a lot of talent and who are very generous. And I have a new one, Julie O. Thank you for signing up. I think you'll find that it's a great community over there, and you can interact with each other and share ideas and show each other what they're making, and it's just a good place over there. So enjoy, and I hope you get as much out of it as I have. So thanks for signing up. Thank you to my previous patrons as well. The other group are my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 25,200, which is amazing. Thank you for that. I love the comments that I get on YouTube. So many people have told me that I've helped them in some way, and that's always really nice to hear, so thanks for that. I do also really appreciate the financial support, the Buy Me a Coffees, the super thanks, the ebooks, the merch, all of that kind of stuff makes my channel sustainable, and I could not do this without that kind of stuff either, so thanks for that. All right, well, let's see if we can set a stone inside of another stone. Well, this is one of my design idea sketchbooks that are available on my merch store. I have a number of different models. This one has a gauge to inches to millimeters conversion chart on the back, which I use all the time. The real feature for me, though, is the dot matrix in it. It allows me to draw better pictures since I'm not terribly good at drawing. And it gives me a place to keep track of my projects. And I started doing this when I started the channel. And I'm really glad I did, because I have a record of the things that I've done, and it allows me to go back and see what I did and how I did it. I usually write the materials down that I'm using, so I don't have to figure out what I used if I want to revisit it. So get yourself a couple of those. They're great, and they're on sale through the 5th. So if you're watching this right after I released it anyway. So this is what I had in mind today. As I said, I was going to, here's my test piece that I did. I thought about doing this for a long time, and somebody in the comments the other day was talking about doing it with he's a woodworker and wanted to do it with a cabochon made out of wood and set a little stone in it. And so I thought, well, that's a good idea. I've thought about making that video, and I have never done it. I'm using stone instead of a piece of wood, but you could certainly do it either way. And so I drilled a hole through it using some diamond burrs very carefully, and then made a little tube rivet kind of, well, I made a little setting for faceted stone. I'm going to use a little CZ. This one's kind of rough because I was experimenting, but I'll try and do a nicer one for the piece we're doing right now. But this tube will go right through here. So what we'll do is we'll end up setting the stone and polishing this little piece first. And then after we stick it through here, I'll probably take a saw and cut this in half so I can bend out the two sides of it to hold it tightly in there. And then we can set it just like a regular cabochon in a setting. And like I said, I picked out for the second piece, this is phosphosiderite, which is like 3.5 to 4 on the hardness scale. So it was relatively easy to do, although it took a little while, kind of taking it slow so I wouldn't crack the stone. And I'll show you how I did that. We're going to try and do it with lapis, which is between 5 and a 6 on the hardness scale. It's always important to think about when you're doing stuff like this, how hard the particular stone is. And the harder it gets, the more easy it is to crack it because it's brittle compared to the softer ones. So we'll see how this goes. I tried to mark a central point here. I hope I got it centered. I made a little scratch with the diamond burr right about there. and that's where we'll try and drill it so that we get it pretty close to the center, and that'll be our first step. What I'm going to do with it is make kind of a simple pendant. Just like this. I'll probably make a bezel out of for this stone and put a border around it with maybe some 16 or some 14 gauge square to give it a little silver around it. The bezel itself is going to be, this bezel is going to be 26 gauge 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, which is 4.76 millimeters by 0.41. For this one I'm using 28 gauge, which is a little bit thinner at 0.33 millimeters. The tube was 2.3 millimeters, and I just grabbed a tube that fit in the hole that I drilled using the diamond burrs. So I didn't really plan that out other than just went with what I had. So you could plan that out however you need to. But the way to drill a stone without breaking it is to do it in water. And if you have a Fordham tool, one of those flex shafts, you can take a little shallow cup of water and use a diamond burr to just gradually drill your way through it, using the water to keep it cool and to lubricate it a little bit. If you try and do it dry, you're a lot more likely to crack it. So we'll do it in the water. I don't have a Fordham, and a Dremel goes much too fast for this. I think the lowest speed it goes is about 5,000 RPMs or something like that. And so you run the risk of not only tearing up your burrs, but more likely to cut too aggressively and maybe shatter something. So we have to slowly abrade our way through there and then widen it out with a wider burr. So that's what we'll do first. I'll make a little bail. I may not make that on camera just to have something to hang it, but we'll put it together at the end and see how it looks. Presupposing that I can do this without cracking the stone. So let's go try that and see. Okay, I have here a little plastic cup with some water in it. That's going to be our coolant and lubricant. I have a cheap Ryobi drill and a couple of diamond burrs. I have this long skinny one. Actually, this is the long skinny one that I used. Hopefully you can see that. It's kind of got a slight taper, but it's got a real narrow tip, so we'll use that to get the hole going and then gradually work our way through, hopefully. Once we have it through, I'll use this kind of like bud-shaped one. Get that focus here. To spread it open to be the width of the hole. Just gradually grind it wider. At least that's my plan. So let's put this bit in here. So the stone I'm doing is harder than the previous one. However, it's thinner too. So I'm hoping that it doesn't take, like a lot longer to do this. But we'll give it a try and see. Okay, so hopefully you can see the little spot in the middle. I used a little diamond burr to scratch that in there after I tried to get it as close to the center as possible. Alright. There it is. So this is going to be time consuming. I'm going to try and play with the pressure so I see it removing material, but not so hard that it's going to push down and crack the stone. starting to get some penetration into the stone. You can see this tip of that is part way in. I decided to switch to the bigger one because it was cutting better. We're just coming through the back side now. If I keep going too far, I'm going to drill a hole through the bottom of the plastic. I'm going to switch back to that bud shaped one. The phosphosiderite spalled off a little piece when I broke through the bottom. This one did not. At least so far. All right. We are through. You can see the hole. Okay, so let's go back to the other spot and dry this off. Okay, so here's a little bit of the bezel. I normally use 3/16, which is 4.76 millimeters, but I cut this down shorter. So definitely I'm not going to need it to be that tall for these. There's our stone. So look pretty close to the center. Looks pretty centered. I think we did all right. Close enough. So let's grab, I have a bunch of these little 3mm CZs in here. Oops. Set that one packing. Right there. So we need to make a bezel for that. And that's a little on the small side. Alright, we'll cut that off there and see how close we get. I got all these little cracks in my hands because it's so dry right now. We had a cold front move in yesterday. Whenever that happens, my skin gets really dry, it seems like. Here's the setup that I use. A lot of times people ask me what my setup is like. Torch and flux and solder things. So, let's get this soldered. I'm going to cut a little more hard silver sheet solder. I'm not sure if when they do this process, if they use any kind of glue inside of the hole. My thought is to maybe throw a little epoxy in there just to make sure it doesn't move at all. But I don't know if that's a good idea or not. Tell me what you think in the comments when you watch this, because I'm going to have to make an arbitrary decision. If you haven't seen these things, these are called miter vise jigs. They're nice for getting really flat ends on things. Yeah, I think that'll work just fine. So we need to put a piece of 26 gauge sheet on the back. I just so happen to have a little bit right here. So let's find a spot on here. I don't need very much, just a little corner. I was a little surprised that the lapis drilled so quickly. The other one, I was being really tentative with it though, because I hadn't tried that particular thing before. But I spent, I don't know, 20 minutes drilling the phosphosiderite because I wasn't sure how hard I could push without, and get by with it. Okay, let's trim off the excess here. Just filing this flush. So I cut off a bit of that 2.3 millimeter tubing. That's just a skosh longer, or actually more than a skosh, but I left plenty of room to work with because the stone is pretty thin, but I wanted to have plenty to work with. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of paste hard solder and just kind of set this atop that. Hopefully we can get it to sit on there nicely and not move around too much. I did it upside down the first time, and I couldn't really tell whether I was centered or not very well. It's not to say this might not move around a little when I solder it though. That looks pretty good. Let's try that. Just kind of slides right through there. So a couple of things I'm going to do. I'm going to file this a lot shorter, and I'm going to drill a hole through the bottom for the pavilion, that stone to kind of sit in. So I'm just going to run a skinny drill bit right down the tube. And that should get us right where we need. So I realized it was going to make it easier to file this down to the right level if I stuck that tube in my miter vise jig. I find more and more uses for these things all the time. A lot of times it's just having something bigger to hold on to when you're filing or something. So I've got that pretty close. close enough to where I think I'm probably going to be okay with that. And I think I'm going to let this pickle for a little while just to get it all cleaned up, and then I'm probably just going to polish it on the rotary tool, because I think if I try and polish something this small by itself on the wheel, I'm going to lose all of it and have to remake it. So let's set him over here. We'll let this pickle for just a bit. And then in the meantime, we can start making the setting for this thing. So let's do that. If you want to see more about making like step bezels for faceted stones or just bezel setting faceted stones, I'll put a link up here to a pretty good video. Let's see. Let's grab some of the little bit thicker bezel. It's tempting to want to connect these on corners when you have corners on a stone. It's not usually a good idea because you'll get more symmetrical corners if you don't do that on one of the corners. That makes sense. I actually dropped this stone when I was on my way back to my work area here. I have linoleum on the floor, but there's concrete right underneath it, so I got scared to pick it up to see if I cracked it, and I did not. So yay for that. I had a really long stretch where I was hitting the bezel size just right on the nose. For a long time, I've really been nailing it, and then the past few days, I've screwed it up several times. I think we did alright on the size that time. I'm going to still use 26 on the back, I think, because I'm going to have a border around it anyway. Because of that, I'm going to leave a little bit of extra, more than I usually would, on the outside. Oops, I think I cut it way wide. Ugh. I saw a different scratch than I made. Oopsie. Make sure to leave enough space around the edges there to put a border on it. You could just trim the sheet off and then do a separate one like this, but I thought I'd lay it on top of some sheet this time. Either way works. One probably looks a bit neater than the other. I had to kind of fight a sense of perfectionism when I first started doing this, because you can drive yourself crazy trying to get everything just perfect. And that kind of sucks the fun out of it. It's fun when something turns out, you know, pretty flawless, but part of the fun is just the learning process, I think. And, this is kind of fun today because I've never done that, you know, with the stone going through the other stone. And I've thought about doing that for a long time. I just never decided to try it. So, you know, and if it turns out looking cool, maybe I'll do it some other time. I added that to my repertoire, so to speak. Make sure we got a seam all the way around. Looks like we do. I want to find some 14 gauge square maybe. So first let's get this sort of straight. And then when we go to bend this, square wire has a tendency to twist on you. Just trying to find an easier way to bend sharply. And so it turns a little bit sideways. You have to kind of correct that as you go. So I like to start at kind of a perfectly straight piece, or as close as I can get without spending 2 hours. I want to kind of put that in the middle of the side, just like we did on the bezel. Let's just take it, put it like this, and see if we can get a pretty sharp sort of bend. That's not bad, actually. So I got it pretty tight, but there's a few gaps here and there. And so I'm going to measure it right where they meet. Normally I'd leave a little extra to file it flat. But since I want it to be super tight, where I have to really work hard to get it on there, I'm going to cut it right there and then file it, so that should make it slightly shorter. In theory. Okay, so sometimes I do what's called pick soldering. That's where you use a titanium or a tungsten pick. This one's titanium. And pick up a little bit of solder and you can put it right where you want it to go. The trick is really to get the whole piece up to the solder flow temperature. So like I picked up a little bar of solder there. The thing people usually do wrong is they stick this in there and hold it in the flame against where it's supposed to go. But really you want to watch the metal until it gets to be the right color. And then it should just jump right on there once you touch it to it. So, if you're interested, I have a good video about that. It's one of the skills that, for me, took me to a whole nother level of abilities, because it opened up a lot of things I couldn't do prior to that. Okay. So I'm going to really make sure this is flat, and I'm going to try and make sure this sheet is as flat as I can get it. And then we'll solder that on there. Alright, so we're going to lean a few on the way around here. Let's see how it turns out. I may go back and pick a little up against the bezel if I need to kind of fill in any gaps. Solder doesn't like to fill in space, and that's another reason I wanted to really make sure that was pretty snug, so we can avoid having any unseemly gaps. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. Okay, so I went ahead and made the bail, and I made a little spot to hook the bail onto this. So let's solder that on. We can add the bail, and then we can see if we can finish up that stone thing. I'm going to go ahead and solder that. I think I'm gonna, as long as that's a good solder joint, I'm gonna let that pickle for a while. See if I can find that other piece, and we'll get it all cleaned up. I'm using my miter vise jig as kind of a way to hold this thing. So it's kind of on the size range that I can deal with my big clunky hands. Periodically make sure he's sitting straight. There we go. Oh, that looks nice. I like that. Okay, so I think let's make a scratch around the backside here so I know where to. I'm going to cut a notch right down the center of this thing. I only want to cut it down to that spot. Okay. let's use something to flare that out just a little bit. So you could also just do it as a regular tube rivet, but I didn't want to have to like tap inwards too much because I didn't want to break the stone. I think that came out alright. So after that gets all pickled up and I got it polished, we'll set the stone and call it a day. So I'm curious how you would go about doing that. That was my method. I mean, that seemed like the most logical way to do it to me. So I'd love to hear your method though. So tell me if you liked it, tell me if you didn't like it, tell me if you've ever done something like that. And I wanted to particularly thank Mike, who's made a couple of comments lately on my channel, who suggested this, because he's learning how to incorporate some wood kind of pieces and maybe get them working together with some jewelry. So so thanks for the suggestion, Mike. That was a good idea and kind of a fun experiment. Okay, last little bit. I put a little bit of tag board behind it. I left the center open on one of the pieces to accommodate those flared out pieces of metal. So I think we can go ahead and set this now. I do this a little differently than some. I use the flat side of my chain nose pliers as a bezel pusher. We'll start with that. Okay, last part. I'm going to do a little bit of burnishing with the rounded outer part here. That's where we rub that top edge just to make sure it's nice and smooth and tight up against the stone. Right. That's kind of what I was shooting for. So I'm pleased and surprised by how easy that was to do. So I think it's a valuable thing to add to your repertoire. And I used pretty basic tools. I used a cordless drill and some diamond burrs, which are $13 to $20 for a set of them online, so they're pretty cheap. So I'll get that cleaned up a little bit on the top of the bezel with a fine blue polishing wheel, and I'll get some better pictures. Alright, well that was the lapis pendant with a little stone set in the middle. I hope you found that useful and enjoyable, and if you did, it really helps me out if you'd hit the like button. I really appreciate that. And I'd love it if you'd check out my main channel page. I have 560 some videos now. I've been doing 3 per week for about 4 years, and so there's a pretty big pool of information over there. Lots of projects, some skills, things like this where I show you how to do something, and I think there's almost certainly something you'll find over there that's useful. So take a moment and subscribe to my channel. There's no cost for that. It'll allow you to ring the bell, which will give you notifications of when I release a new video, which is Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday generally. And don't forget to hit the video description down below. There's some important links there. There's a link to my merch store should you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks or some other piece of merch. It's still 20% off through the 5th, so you have a couple more days, at least 2 days I think, by the time I release this. So get over there and get yourself some presents. There's another link for Patreon if you want to find out more about that community. There's multiple tiers of membership there with differing privileges, including at the lowest level, just getting my videos without any advertisements. Up above that, you get some tutorials that are specifically for Patreon. And we do some live streams occasionally, which is fun to get to meet some of the people over there and talk about jewelry. So yeah, check it out. It's a nice place, and it's a great community full of really cool people. Finally, there's a link to my ebooks, which are guides to my tutorials, and the latest one is 2024. We're currently working on 2025s. It has a page for each of the videos I did during 2024, and a link to the video, information about the video, including a picture of the sketch I drew for it, the final outcome, a list of materials you need, difficulty rating, and other information that I made in the notes about it, like did I find the project to be a satisfying outcome? Would I do it differently if I was to do it again? Did I learn something useful from it, and has that affected how I do things now? So oftentimes I learn something new when I try something new, so it's always a good learning experience for me. But I think it's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects and a really nice way to support my channel. So you can even get both of the previous books for a slight discount, in addition to the 20% off through the 5th. So check that out. It's a great way to support my channel. Thank you for that in advance. All right, well, take care. Happy silversmithing.